Most of my life I was sure disaster was right around the corner, waiting for its moment. And now, at 90 years old, I struggle to remember what I was even so afraid of. My name is Walter, and I spent decades lying awake in the dark, bracing for things that never came, while the life that did come and go was happening quietly all around me. When I was young, worry felt like responsibility. I thought it meant I cared, that it meant I was being a good husband, a serious father, a man who understood how hard the world could be. I worried about money before there was a real reason to, about losing jobs I hadn't lost, about disasters that had not even chosen a direction yet. I would sit at the kitchen table after everyone went to bed, bills spread out like evidence of a crime, convinced that one mistake, one bit of bad luck, would send us tumbling into some permanent ruin. My wife Ellen used to come in, wrap her robe tight around her, and ask why the light was still on. I'd say I was just finishing up, just thinking. She would rub my shoulder and tell me to come to bed, that we had enough, that we always figured things out. I would nod, but inside I believed she was being hopeful and I was being realistic. That was the story I told myself, that my fear was wisdom. In my 30s, I was sure I was one step away from failure. Every performance review felt like a trial. If my boss called me into his office, my stomach would drop before I even stood up. I rehearsed speeches in my head on the walk down the hallway, apologies for mistakes I hadn't made, explanations for problems that did not exist. I'd come home exhausted, not from work, but from the hours I had spent inside my own head, arguing with futures that never showed up. I worried about what people thought of me in ways that seem almost strange now. If a neighbor didn't wave back, I'd replay it for days. If someone else got a promotion, I would smile and shake their hand, then lie awake wondering what they had that I didn't, what quiet flaw in me had finally been exposed. I thought everyone else moved through life with confidence, and I was the only one secretly unqualified to be there. The strange part is, from the outside, my life looked steady. We paid our mortgage, the kids grew, we had Sunday dinners, summer trips to the lake, arguments about small things that felt large at the time. But even in the middle of good moments, part of me was bracing. Watching my daughter blow out her birthday candles, I would suddenly picture hospital bills we couldn't pay. Sitting on the porch with Ellen on a warm evening, I would think about what would happen if I lost my job next month. Fear has a way of making the present feel like a waiting room. You sit there, but you are not really there. You are watching the door, waiting for your name to be called, certain that when it is, the news will be bad. In my 40s, the company I worked for did have layoffs. That day, I thought, here it is, the thing I've been preparing for. I drove to work with a tightness in my chest that felt almost familiar. Names were called, people packed their desks, and somehow, mine was not one of them. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt something close to anger. All those years of worry, and when the storm finally came near, it passed right by my house. I went home that night and still checked the bills. The years kept moving, whether I enjoyed them or not. My son learned to drive, and I spent weeks imagining car accidents before he even pulled out of the driveway alone. My daughter left for college, and instead of feeling pride, I felt dread, certain she would fail, get hurt, or call me one night in tears, asking to come home. She did call, but mostly to tell us about friends, classes she liked, a professor who believed in her. The disasters I had rehearsed never made an appearance. What did happen was quieter. My children grew into people I admired. Ellen's hair turned grey, then soft white. Lines formed around her eyes from years of laughing at things I can't even remember now. We had scares, of course, a surgery here, a lost job there, a year that was tighter than we liked. But each time we adjusted, we asked for help when we had to, we let go of things we didn't really need. The end of the world kept not arriving. I didn't notice the shift at first. It came slowly, like evening light changing the color of a room. Somewhere in my 70s, after I retired, I had a morning where I sat with my coffee and realized there was more life behind me than ahead. That thought would have terrified the younger me. Instead, it did something else. It made my old worries look small, like toys left behind in an attic. I began to see how much time I had spent being afraid of being judged, of not measuring up, of losing everything, when in truth, most people were too busy with their own fears to study mine. The mistakes I thought would define me had already faded, even in my own memory. The embarrassing moments, the awkward conversations, the things I said wrong, they did not follow me into old age. What followed me were smaller things. The way Ellen squeezed my hand in the car, the sound of my kids laughing in the back seat, the smell of coffee early on a Saturday. Ellen passed away when I was 82. That was a fear that did come true, and it hurt in a way I cannot fully explain. But even then, I saw something clearly. All those nights I had worried about losing her, I had not loved her more in those moments. I had only suffered twice, once in imagination and once in reality. The imagined suffering did nothing to protect me from the real thing. It only stole evenings we could have spent talking, sitting close, being quiet together. Now, at 90, my days are slower. I move carefully, I forget names, I repeat stories. But my mind, in some ways, is gentler than it has ever been. When a new worry tries to settle in, I recognize the old shape of it. I almost smile. I have a long history with fears that never kept their appointments. If I could truly sit across from the man I was at 35, really look at him the way I now look at old photographs, I think the first thing I would notice is how tired he is. Not from work, not from the kids, not even from the long drive home, but from carrying the weight of things that have not happened and may never happen. I can see him at that small kitchen table we had back then, the one with the scratch on the corner, the yellow light overhead making everything look a little harsher than it really was. He has bills spread out in front of him like they are pieces of a puzzle he is afraid he cannot solve, his jaw tight, his mind racing ahead into futures that only exist in his imagination. I would not sit down to correct him or to explain life because he would not hear it. At 35, I believed worry was proof of love and responsibility. I thought if I stopped worrying, even for a moment, it meant I was careless, that something terrible would slip past me because I had dared to relax. So I would not argue with him about that. I would just speak gently, the way you do to someone who has forgotten that rest is allowed. I would tell him to go to bed. I would tell him that the numbers will look the same in the morning, that his children are safe in their rooms, that his wife is already asleep and would rather have him beside her than guarding a stack of paper. From where I am now, at 90, I can see the long line of years that came after that night, and I know something he cannot possibly know yet. Most of the disasters he is rehearsing will never step through his door. The humiliations he imagines, the failures he is sure are waiting just ahead, the judgments he feels from people who are not thinking about him nearly as much as he believes, they fade before they even take shape. And the few hard things that do arrive, the real losses, the real pain, they do not follow the script he writes for them in the dark. They come in their own way, with their own timing, and when they do, he is not the small, helpless man he feels like at that table. He is stronger than he knows, and he is not alone. There are hands that reach for him, voices that answer the phone, shoulders that lean back. I would tell him something else too, something he is in no hurry to understand. I would tell him to listen for the sound of his children breathing down the hall, that soft, steady rhythm that fills the house at night. At his age, he thinks wealth is a number that must be reached, a cushion thick enough to soften every possible fall. He does not yet understand that this, right here, is a form of wealth that cannot be stored in a bank or measured on a page. The presence of the people you love under the same roof, alive and close, is a kind of fortune that is only visible when you have already spent most of it. And if I turn from him to you, to the person listening to my voice now, I do it with the same tenderness because I remember exactly how real your fears feel. You may be lying awake these days, staring at the ceiling while your mind runs numbers over and over, or replaying something you said, wishing you could reach back and change it. You may be building entire futures in your head where everything goes wrong, where one mistake leads to another, and you end up somewhere you never wanted to be. I know that place intimately. I lived there for decades, believing I was being careful, when really I was just absent from my own life. From where I sit now, with more years behind me than I have ahead, the view is different. Time has a way of sorting things without asking your permission. The moments I spent worrying did not prevent pain, and they did not guarantee safety. What they did was thin out my days, make beautiful, ordinary hours feel like waiting rooms for tragedies that never arrived. Fear dressed itself up as preparation, as wisdom, as love, but so often it was only a thief, quiet and polite, taking small pieces of joy while I thanked it for its service. The life you are trying so hard to protect is not hidden in the future. It is not waiting on the other side of some perfect plan or final payment or flawless decision. It is happening now, in rooms that may seem too familiar to be special, at kitchen tables where nothing remarkable appears to be going on, in quiet drives where you and someone you love are just sharing the road. One day, if you are lucky enough to reach an age like mine, those are the scenes that will glow in your memory, not the nights you spent guarding yourself from shadows. So when you can, even a little, loosen your grip on all those imagined tomorrows. Let tonight be just tonight. Let the people near you be enough for this hour. The future will come in its own shape, whether you worry or not. Do not hand over all your days to things that have not even decided to exist.